Stop trying to scale your startup. In this video, I'm going to share the mistake so many early stage, especially first time founders make when it comes to trying to scale their startup right out of the gate. And I'm going to show you this formula that I've observed in my startups and other startups that have been successful called the one by one unicorn method. Okay. Name doesn't really matter. I'm just throwing a name on my theory. Before I continue, my apologies if I seem a little congested. Recovering from a flu, it's going around like crazy. Therefore, working through it. This is my commitment to keep bringing these types of videos out. Let's get back to this one by one unicorn. What ends up happening is startup founders follow the advice of the 7 habits of highly successful people and say, start with the end in mind. And I get it. That's a good piece of advice when it comes to approaching life and leadership and management and all that stuff. Not for startups, not as a founder. What ends up happening is the founder goes, I'm going to make it to $1 billion. I'm going to become that unicorn. I'm going to get millions of users. I'm going to sell my solution to Microsoft, all those things. And they start going all the way to the end. And we're taught to visualize our goals, etc. And there's a complete misleading science behind that. It's actually not the best motivation to have you stay in the game when it comes to all the hard things that are involved with being a startup founder. Forget trying to go massive scale. Founders end up pushing back to me when I'm trying to drill them down to focus. They say, but Ed, how is this going to make me $1 million? What they're really saying is, Ed, I've got bills to pay. Ed, I want a salary. How's this going to get me there? And that is not the time to focus on that. You want to be focusing on this one by one formula. And here's how it goes. I tell founders, you only need to do 3 things once at a time. Okay. So 3 things once at a time, one by one. And here they are. The first thing is get one user to fall in love with your solution. I don't care how you do it. Sometimes founders go and interview that one user and they say, what do you need to see in my solution to really move the needle? It's not going to be pretty. Design is not the important thing. It's about user experience. It's about making sure that the one user understands the problem you're solving. They have that problem and sees the solution and can experience it enough to fall in love and say, thank you for picking my problem to solve. Or sometimes what happens is you have a set of assumptions, you probably built something that scratches your own itch and you put it out there, and you might be surprised as to who's using your solution, who's using your product. And you go, wait a second. I thought I was solving the problem for these people, but these people were super excited. I have a game company that I've been working on, and I put out my game and I thought I was going to attract a certain type of, Magic the Gathering hardcore gamer. Well, if you look at the people who are playing my game right now, they are not that. And I was actually surprised as to who was coming and playing the game and what was going on there. This is a personal example that I use. I've done this with SaaS companies and other edtech platforms and what have you, but I've also gone and I've seen other startups focus, the ones that we know, unicorns, have focused on one user or one particular set of users, and they've dominated and they've gotten them to fall in love with their product before expanding. So get one user to fall in love with your solution. This comes from Y Combinator. Make something people love. Well, I'm going to reduce that even further and start by making something one person will love, and then get to know them and figure out why. Why do they love your solution so much? Gather that data, and that's going to inform your continual development and continuous improvement process when you're developing your product. Then that's the first thing. You just have to get one user fall in love with your solution. The next, get them to share with one other user. Here's the thing. A lot of founders come out of the gate and they get their first 100 users or even first 1,000 users, and then it peters off. This is the reason investors don't pay attention to that first swell of users when you launch something, because there's hype and you're probably using a lot of social capital, et cetera, to get to those users. Well, that just doesn't show any sustainability. They want to see your pipeline. If the one user who you think is in love with your solution is not sharing that with one other user organically, then there's something off about what you've done in the user experience or the way that they're able to share, or you need to somehow make an adjustment to that. And I'd go ask that one user, what's it take for you to share? When do you usually share? What happens in your mind? And what would move the needle for you to say, I need to go blast this out, share this on my Facebook. I started using this. I think this is the greatest thing. Or when you're at dinner with your friends and you're saying, you will not believe the app that I just downloaded. I got to show this to you. What's it going to take? So you got to get them to share with one other user. And this is where it's about the hyper growth that investors are going to look for, but it's also for you to know that you have a legitimate startup product that people love and they're willing to share. Because what happens if you put $10,000 into Google Ads and you get 10,000 users? Well, are you going to do that for the rest of your startup career? That's not going to work, because it's only going to get to the point where you're just spending money to make money. And startups have to have an exponential hyper growth curve. And that means, yeah, spend money to acquire users. You'll eventually do that as well. But there has to be a certain virality. There has to be an organic exponential growth component where you can tell an investor, for every one customer we go get, they share with one other customer or two other customers or this and that. This is the metrics. These are the metrics that we're tracking. And then you've got hyper growth. You've got the startup growth that's going to dominate, that's going to disrupt, or whatever that you want to talk about. So here we are, one by one. Get one user to fall in love with your solution, get them to share with one other user. If they're not sharing, something's off. If maybe they're not really in love with your solution, maybe they're just paying you lip service and you have a false positive there. A lot of founders get caught up thinking their solution is the best thing since sliced bread, but nobody's sharing it. Nobody's talking about it. Those are all signs that you can go in and say, wait a second, where am I missing something in this formula? So it's one by one by one. The next thing is make $1 somewhere in the process. Now, you might be thinking, if you're good at math, I pretty much failed math. I was supposed to be really good at math, but I failed math for various reasons. If you go 1 times 1 times 1, it equals 1. Well, yeah, because it's going to equal $1, one thing to focus on. And it's contrarian to what people think. They go, well, it shouldn't be 10 by 10 by 10 to get to 1,000. No, because then your focus and your efforts are going to be diluted. You want to focus on the one thing, because how do you know what that one thing is? So you want to get to the one thing. And if it's not the one thing, swap it out for one other thing. And this is how we test our assumptions and we start developing that pathway to unicorn status. So what you do is you get one user fall in love with your solution. They share with one other user, and then somewhere figure out how to make $1. That's all you got to do. Maybe the $1 comes out of the transaction, or $1 comes out of the referral, or something like that. Or maybe you can charge both in 50 cents each. Now you're saying, but Ed, how am I supposed to get away with charging just $1? This is just a thought exercise. It's all about thought leadership here, because if your users aren't even willing to pay $1, okay, less than a price of a cup of coffee, then you've got problems. And they say, there's another piece of advice that comes from Y Combinator. They say the best feedback that you're going to get is when you tell someone your price. So I like to imagine myself saying, if I told them it was $1, please take out your credit card, which takes effort, punch it in, give me $1. What are they going to say? And if they say, no, not even $1, then I got problems. Then there's something wrong with my value proposition in there. Now, obviously, you're going to charge more, especially if you're a SaaS platform, but figure out $1. And then I creep it up. I go $1. And then I go, okay, what would it take to charge $2, $3, $4, $5? And that's what's called price optimization, right? And then if it's SaaS platform, figure it out. $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000. I don't know. Depends on your pricing model. But, when I first started one of my companies that got funded, I created a product and I said, can I get one person? Does this solve problems for one person? Get their feedback. So all I did 100 free trials, and I sat and I did it with them. And I said, what do you think? And it was very manual, MVP style, no software at the time. And they said, I love it. Great. What's it going to take for you to refer one other person, right? So I was getting referrals. Then I did the test. I said, okay, you know, I said, would you pay $1 for it? And this was the thought. Not everybody said they would. So I was like, can I sell out of my next run of this product, my manual product, and sell it out for $50 a piece? And I did. And that was enough for me to pay for the next run of my prototypes. And then I went $100. Next thing you know, I'm in price optimization range, and people are paying anywhere from $1,000 for a suite of products to, per session, et cetera. And then we started, putting it into the software platform, et cetera. That's all I did. So you just have to figure out where to make $1 in the process. Again, $1 is metaphorical, but doesn't have to be necessarily, because the thought exercise is, if I say this costs you $1 and they're not even willing to pay that, then what are they saying about my product? So there you have it. Before you worry about scale and say, Ed, we want world domination, millions of users, I'm going to make $1 million, to pay myself, a nice salary, et cetera. I get it. The pressure is on, you're cash strapped, all those things. But trust me, if investors can't see that you have gone out and thought these things through and beaten it up, gotten through that idea maze, as Andreessen Horowitz would tell you, in terms of what about the one user and are they referring? Because eventually that's going to lead to customer acquisition costs. And, you're going to be able to predict, to get to the point of default to live. At what point in time will you be just profitable enough that if they really put money in, you'd, go to the moon and you'd be ready for unicorn status? And what have you thought about where to make that $1 in the process? It may not be the way that you expect it. They may not just pay $1 for a subscription. They may pay $1 to an advertiser, might pay you $1, or a sponsor or something like that, or $1 comes out of the transactions and the activities. If you're building a marketplace, never assume that that they love your product, they'll share your product, or they'll pay you $1 through the process. There you have it. Focus on that formula, especially when you're starting off, and you will get to the point where you understand if you can make one user happy, get them to share with one user, and make $1 in the process, you will be able to reach 1 million users that grow to another 1 million users, and you will make not millions, but billions of dollars, or be worth billions of dollars. You'll achieve that unicorn status. There you have it. Hope this has been helpful. Let me know, ask questions, leave some comments. The feedback is always helpful to inform these videos. I make these videos based on my advisory sessions in startups.com. Speaking of which, join us on startups.com, our community-based accelerator, online founders accelerating other founders. I'm there. We give office hours. We hold group meetings. It's all a wonderful community. Hope that you will consider joining us. And if you are already part of the community, thank you very much for joining me and sharing this journey together, inspiring these videos. I will see you in the next one.